Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, June 26th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris on this episode. We have another promotion to discuss as Jordan Westburg is joining the Orioles. Injury news from the Marlins in their rotation, another switcheroo in the Atlanta rotation. And then our main topic today, we're going to dig into some second-year hitters, just see what direction those players are going as they get more exposure to big league pitching. As we get started, you were telling me about some biodome thing you were in this weekend. What was that all about?
Yeah, I have a friend who basically shares my birthday. He's the day before, and we've known each other for a really long time. And we're also poor planners. We do a bad job planning. So we realized it was our birthday weekend. We hadn't planned anything. So we just threw some camping gear in the back of the car and went north and had some very loose plans. There's a site called Hip Camp where we were searching for some campgrounds that were available in the short term. And we found a geodesic dome, which is like you could probably sleep like 8 to 10 people in it, but it's a sort of a semi-large dome with a wooden floor that's raised up off the ground. And it was in Bolinas, so when we opened our windows to our dome, we had this wide view of the pond that was on the property and then the bay. So we were just looking right out at the ocean. And we walked down to there, to the beach, had some beers on the beach. You're basically looking at San Francisco, but you can't see the Golden Gate Bridge. So it's like sort of, right around Point Reyes. And we had a good time. It was fun, getting to know a little town and, stopped by and saw some friends on the way up and had a good time. I got a new hat. I should have brought it down. The San Antonio Chanclas. The logo is a flying slipper, like a flying flip
Shoe?
flop.
Okay.
Flip flop. And it's about how like your abuela might hit you with the shoe if you were bad. So one of those. I got some new shoes from my wife. These look nice. I like.
Oh, there you go.
She was saying like, I wear the same shoes all the time, so.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. That's it's gotten worse in the last few months too. I'm getting real lazy. So I got a bunch of new shoes that I ordered recently. I think my midlife crisis is going to be becoming this 40-year-old guy that wanders into sneakerhead situations with no prior knowledge of anything about sneakers and buys the crap that no one actually wants. Like I'm going to be the mark when I go to those kinds of places. They're like, look at this guy, look at this idiot buying stuff nobody wants. That's going to be me.
Well, it'll be cheaper.
It'll be cheaper. That's right. It'll be cheaper. And I will like it. That's the important thing, right? As long as I like it, that's all that matters. Well, glad you had a nice weekend. I'm looking at those domes. It looks actually a lot like some of the stuff that started popping up, like a bigger version of the domes that were popping up on sidewalks and streets during COVID when they were trying to create more outdoor dining spaces, especially in the Midwest where it's colder. In New York, yeah. I think I saw some of these like small dome things. So very cool.
It was a really cool property. It was so weird. Like we were thinking about like maybe just planning and actually having our birthday party there next year because there was a cactus garden and it was like a real quality cactus garden, like, like really nice cactus garden. And then a blue fire truck that looked like it was straight out of Burning Man. And just like stuff to bomb around on, like a whole pond with a little pier in it and stuff. So we were like, this could be fun with 2 Airstreams and like another property. Like it could be something where we just take over the property for a weekend and have fun there.
Awesome. Well,
scouting. That's what we were doing. We were scouting.
Scouting for your lack of planning was just scouting for future birthdays.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about Jordan Westburg for a bit. The Orioles are bringing him up. Joey Ortiz was the corresponding demotion to make room on the roster. The immediate question most people have is what type of player should we expect Jordan Westburg to be coming up from the minors for the very first time? You look at his results at AAA, they've been fantastic. This is a guy that has spent basically a year at that level, 158 combined games between 2022 and 2023, 36 homers, 15 for 18 as a base stealer, and that's with about a 280 average, 360, like 566 OBP, something in that range, and about a low 20s K rate. So he draws walks. He doesn't strike out too much, hits the ball pretty hard, and can run a little bit. This all seems like good stuff for Jordan Westburg, but what do you expect this to actually look like against top-level pitching?
Yeah, the ongoing discussion we have about like how much a guy will actually strike out in the major leagues has come to a head. We have more at our disposal, like more stats at our disposal now that he has played in AAA. And in fact, at RotoWire, you've got contact percentage, which is overall contact percentage. And that's at 76%. So just comparing across all levels this year, some people near him are Samad Taylor, Bo Naylor, and Vidal Brujan, just by contact rate. A little bit better than Mark Vientos, which is good because Mark Vientos does not make much contact. And a little worse than, let me see if I get somebody interesting here. A little worse than, oh, these are all uninteresting. Taylor Trammell. Taylor Trammell showed up somewhere else on a comp list. You did a slightly different approach to coming up with your comp list, and you also came up with Bo Naylor.
I did. I took players 24 and under at AAA going back to like 2006, sorted by WRC Plus, and then started to look at the actual slash lines and some of the swing and miss. So Naylor did pop up as a similar player. I think what is really difficult to discern using the leaderboards this way is that the quality of the contact makes a huge difference in terms of the long-term outcomes. And by most indications, what we have for Westburg so far, he does hit the ball hard, right? And the player that I started to see when we were describing what he might do going into the show was Matt Chapman, right? If there's a little bit of swing and miss, a little more swing and miss in this profile against top-level pitching than you'd think based on what we're seeing at AAA, that wouldn't be that much of a surprise. He's going to draw enough walks to keep the OBP at a good level. He plays on the left side of the infield, and he's going to get to the power consistently. And you think about some of the up and downs we've seen from Matt Chapman, that sort of makes sense. We know that if you barrel the ball consistently, you can get away with those stretches where you might strike out 30% of the time. And that's not necessarily where Westburg settles in long term, but I think you can see a few snapshots of the type of player he's likely to be, and with some speed added on too. It's Matt Chapman with some stolen base potential. I don't know if Jordan Westburg is going to steal 15 bases every year in the big leagues, but he's probably going to be at least a 5+ sort of guy, especially with the rules and the things that we've seen that have opened up speed so much in this game this season.
Yeah, and it's funny, like how you find your comps is as important as anything. I tried another way, so this is the third way to try and find Jordan Westburg comps. This is thanks to Chris Clegg, Roto Clegg, that's Clegg on Twitter. He posted Jordan Westburg's zone contact rate, which is specific and also, I think, pretty interesting. That gets really to your ability to make contact outside of your decision-making process. We know that his chase rate is 26%, so he looks like he has pretty good decision-making, Westburg does. But the zone contact being 80, that is not great. And so what I did was I took all the major leaguers this year that were within a rounding of 80% zone contact and were qualified. So I got 20 players. As an average, they averaged nearly a 10% walk rate and a 26% strikeout rate. So if you look and you see the bat, for instance, projecting a 26% strikeout rate for Westburg, even though he only struck out 21% of the time, this is partially where it might be coming from. And an ISO of 207. And I think that's important because I think this is the kind of profile where you have to hit for power to make it work, you know? But Westburg has cleared those ISOs in the minors, and so he could join this group. This group includes Matt Chapman. However, Matt Chapman's max EVs over the past few years have been closer to 115, while Jordan Westburg's max EV this year in the minor leagues is 110. So who is Matt Chapman with a little less raw power, but also with some good defensive value? Gunnar Henderson's on this list. So that's a possible outcome. That also speaks to maybe Baltimore having a sort of type in how they produce players. Anthony Volpe is on this list. Eugenio Suarez is on this list. Paul Goldschmidt is on this list. And that's the last one I want to bring up really quickly, because Westburg pulled the ball 50% of the time last year and only 38% of the time this year. So looks like there's been an adjustment already to a sort of pull happy approach that got him to this power maybe and got him to this whiff rate level. And he's pulled up off of that. And so, Goldschmidt is obviously, Hall of Fame bound and, really a top end outcome for anybody. But just want to throw out there that Goldschmidt is also on this list. So I would assume the over-under for his strikeout rate is around 26%. The over-under for his ISO is around 200. I'm going to take the average of all these players and kind of say that's a kind of a likely outcome, actually. And I think that makes him interesting, but it isn't someone who's going to maybe save your batting average.
Yeah, so there's some risk there, but a lot of things that Jordan Westburg should be able to do in relatively short order. It probably is going to cost Jorge Mateo playing time. He comes up a lot on this show, already buried in the bottom of the order. That's been the case for most of this season.
And all that stuff that we believed in short samples. And I don't know. I'm not going to say we. I'm not going to throw you under the bus, but I'll throw myself under the bus. I saw, with Jorge Mateo early on, a real change in his chase rate. And it was great. And it was awesome. And it lasted 30 games. And now his chase rate right now is the rolling chase rate is higher than it's been in his career.
Yeah, makes sense. WRC plus down at 70. So it doesn't really matter how good you are defensively. If you are throwing a 70 out there, you're not going to play. So
did his eyes get big? Like, what the heck happened? It's just hilarious. Like, there was real change there. I was sure of it. And now everything looks really about the same as ever.
Yeah, it's not great. As far as who is Westburg an upgrade over, if you're looking at rest of season projections, I mean, he's going to fit, I would say, down to at least 12 team leagues, maybe even down to some 10s, depending on who you're rostering. This slash line that we're seeing projected is going to be right where you start to see players that are kind of borderline for those rosters. Do you think... Let's see. Let's get some would you rathers fired up in here. I should have had these ready to go. He's eligible at short and third in a lot of leagues. I'm curious how that's going to impact him too. But let's say,
and third is harder to fill. Is he third and short on NFBC?
I gotta check him on there. I couldn't pick him up this weekend, so I gotta take a look.
He's not even in there maybe yet.
We'll have an answer on that momentarily. I mean, if you're playing Suarez right now, given some of the concerns, we believe the power is coming back for him. But if you're in a 12-team league and Eugenio Suarez is a spot, he's shortstop only there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that kind of blows up the Suarez question, unless. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's other places. There's not NSV is not the only thing in the world.
Sure. Suarez versus Westburg rest of season.
Well, since Suarez is on the comp list and so old, and Westburg is young, I'll just go with the younger version of Suarez.
Okay, so you
just
consider that
running. Yeah,
in a shallow league, that's playable. I'll do another third base one just to kind of throw that out there too. JD Davis. I mean, he's not really a cut because he's not bad, but would you see Westburg as an upgrade over JD Davis the rest of the way?
Not in batting average. In power, Westburg would have to, hit for the power that is expected of him, which is not always the case. Speed, he'll win. Playing time?
I'm not worried about him playing. I think Westburg's going to play. He'll play unless he gets demoted. So that you have to factor that into your risk, but
yeah. That one's tougher. I think I might stick with Davis.
Yeah, Davis has just quietly been so good, and having improved his own defense really stabilized his playing time in a way that we probably wouldn't have expected coming into the season. If you're throwing Brandon Drury out there, that's an easy one. Justin Turner, is Westburg a clear upgrade over Justin Turner at this point? Probably. What a Westburg over Brian Hayes?
Yeah, power upgrade.
So you'd probably do that. And then on the shortstop side, if we're looking at rest of season shortstop options, you mentioned Anthony Volpe before as one of the comps that came up with one of those methods. Volpe versus Westburg, new toy versus new toy from 3 months ago.
I think so. The graphs, the day-to-day graphs are there. It is interesting that Volpe has survived the first he should be demoted media hubbub.
He has.
But that doesn't mean he's not going down. I mean, how many times have you heard the dreaded, he's got my vote of confidence from the manager, and then, oh, well, we just, we've got a roster crunch in the situation. We need some healthy guys up here and whatever it is. I think that's sort of my entry point for Westburg is around Volpe. I did the auction calculator, and 23rd on the auction calculator among all shortstops is Jorge Mateo. 22nd is Chris Taylor. 21st is Anthony Volpe. 24th is Luis Garcia. So this is the would you rather group for me. He's comfortably ahead, I think, of Elvis Andrus, Ha-Seong Kim, Orlando Arcia.
No, those are all layups.
Abrams. Yeah, those are all layups.
I think if you're in like the Ezekiel Tovar, maybe Jeremy Pena, who we talked about last week as someone who hasn't really been the player we expected, or even Tim Anderson,
as you get excited.
Well, no, I think it's more like if you're in a shallow league and you're lagging in the middle infield, especially, you're thinking very hard about cutting those players because we're nearing the midway point. We're not quite there yet. It's hard to believe that we still have more than half a season left to play.
I have these guys in so many of the keeper leagues where I'm like, you can't just cut Jeremy Pena.
Yeah, but in a 10-team league or a 12-team league with more shallow rosters, you could, and you might have to.
I think what about these people in like more medium team, 12, like more 15-team leagues? Then I think you're looking at Volpe, Taylor, Mateo. I think I might have Luis Garcia over Westburg just because, Garcia I think is underrated. Is that possible?
Yeah, it is, but
I mean,
when you're taking Luis Garcia,
rate,
you're taking Luis Garcia over Jordan Westburg? No, I'm not doing that.
It's a bird in the hand, dude. 12% strikeout rate, 6% swing strike rate, 7% barrel rate, 110 max EV for Luis Garcia. You're just not impressed with the home runs and the stolen bases.
Yeah, it's just not enough. Like there's so much more ceiling on Westburg right now. I think you have to go Westburg.
All right, that's fair. I also know that it's fair because I would take him over the other guys in there. The only caveat I have is that Chris Taylor can be roster glue. He's hurt right now, but even as bad as he's been at times this year, he's saved my butt. He's like, when I have him on my roster, a lot of times it's like, oh God, someone got hurt on a Tuesday. Well, good thing I have Chris Taylor and I can move my whole roster around and make this work because there are very few people who are outfield, MI, and CI, plus second, third, and short. You know what I mean? Like Chris Taylor is a godsend in that way. So, when you're comparing him to Volpe, Mateo, and Garcia, you're just comparing to people who only play short for the most part.
Yeah. Oh, all right. So that gives you some basic ideas. I mean, I think you can. I think the most difficult decision you have to make
I take him over Tovar. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm gonna throw Tovar on that list.
I think the Tim Anderson line for a shallow league, even though I still believe in Tim Anderson long term. What am I doing in leagues where I have Tim Anderson? He's on the bench. He's on the bench with 4 games to begin the week in NFBC leagues for me.
Yeah, he is for me too. In my main, it's so aggressive. I feel like if I get good news that he's starting tonight, like I might put him in. The projections still like Anderson more than how he's playing. I just wonder about this shoulder for Tim Anderson. You know what I mean? Like, he obviously is sitting games because of it.
He's got a 64.9% ground ball rate. I know when we last checked on him, the ground ball rate wasn't quite that far out of whack. I'm getting closer to the drop point where I'm like, hey, this projection is good, but it's kind of like what we dealt with when Max Muncy, I think, was dealing with the elbow injury last year. and the projections
Yeah.
kept saying, keep him,
He's fine,
trade
but
for
you're
him, go
like,
get
well, do
him.
you know projections that he has a shoulder problem?
Yeah.
And you know what? It's funny. I was just on the Luis Garcia page, and this is way too uncomfortably looking like the Luis Garcia page. And in my main, I actually have both of them. I
Oh,
wonder at some
no.
point if we're just like, well, this week we're playing Luis Garcia over Tim Anderson. Actually, we might be sitting both, but if we get to that point where we'd rather have Garcia in over Anderson, then maybe it's drop City.
Yeah, I'm looking at the recent EVs too, and he talked about this a few years ago. I think it was one of the first times he ever did a presentation at First Pitch Arizona about Statcast and how you could sometimes look at the rolling graphs and you can see just how much an injury might be impacting a player compared to his normal baseline. And I'm wondering if that might give us the information we need with Tim Anderson.
How are you seeing that with Anderson?
Well, I'm looking at it more on the game log page right now and just kind of eyeballing it that way.
Oh, a game log on Fangraphs?
Yeah, you can look at the EVs from there.
Because they've got Statcast in there now.
There's not a lot of hard contact in the last couple of weeks from him. Something's just
Ooh, those are
off.
gross. There's a lot of 70s.
Yeah. Yeah, this is not good for Tim Anderson. The optimism I had just a few weeks ago is fading the more and more I look at the profile.
And look at those terrible launch angles. A lot of negative launch angles.
I've always thought too that when you have a shoulder problem, the ground ball rate tends to go up. It's one of those numbers that I don't know. I need more information to like state it as fact, but I've noticed that a lot with players that have had shoulder injuries for, geez, the last 15 years now, digging into these
And
players.
the second base thing has got it, like it's about the shoulder as much as anything, and that's not good news either that he's playing second base. So
Oh yeah, flipping him with Andrews defensively to take some wear and tear off his arm.
that's awful.
Yeah,
I feel bad for him.
this might not get better. I mean, the All-Star break maybe could help, just having a few days off. Maybe they could give him some rest before it too to really
Cortisone
extend
shot
that
or something.
Okay, Westburg versus Tim Anderson. I think I'm on Jordan Westburg for the rest of the season. I think I've talked myself into it.
Wow, that's painful, dude.
Yeah, it really is. All right, we'll stop with the rambling of how concerned we are about Tim Anderson. Let's talk about the situation in Miami. Trevor Rogers shut down through the All-Star break, so things are not progressing quite the way they had hoped. The good news is Braxton Garrett continues to pitch really well for them, and we had a question about Garrett. If there's anything going on with his pitch mix, anything that's just different about him that's enabled him to reach this new level. The strikeout rate is up. The walk rate is down. Love to see both of those things happening together. He is getting hit inside the zone a little bit less this year than last year. And everyone knows Braxton Garrett doesn't throw particularly hard, but if you have a 92.4% zone contact percentage, which he had last year, it's hard to live that way unless you're an extreme ground ball, like, peak Dallas Keuchel type. That's just a unbelievably high zone contact percentage to have. A big difference seems to be the cutter as far as the pitch mix changes. That's something that Braxton Garrett didn't have before. But looking at some of the heat maps too, I think his slider is being commanded a lot better, or at least if it's not an actual command change, where he's locating it makes a lot more sense now. And I think that's been a big difference for him so far this year too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot about location. I do think that the cutter is cool, but it's on the level of, he has a bunch of pitches. So I'm not, this isn't like how excited I would be if Graham Ashcraft had a third pitch. You know what I mean? Like, this is like, okay, well, he had 5 pitches, now he has 6. And it's not like the cutter comes in as a super high stuff, answer either. What's really interesting is that he does have 5 pitches that are all like basically 90 stuff plus. And that doesn't sound great at first, but 92 stuff plus for a sinker is not terrible. And all these other pitches are usable and functional, and he's got a great location plus. So this is definitely, a way to try and find sleepers, is just kind of look for guys who can command it and have large arsenals. And I think he's a little bit over his skis, honestly. This type, he can keep it going for a while. But like, for example, his velocity on his four seam is 90. So this isn't something where I necessarily think it's just stuff plus missed. It's just like stuff with a small s missed.
Right. Yeah.
Like there's nobody who watches Braxton Garrett and thinks, woof, like, need to fan myself. I mean, I think in any given year, I will bet on this. And I know he's now had like two good seasons, two good half seasons in a row, but the two seasons, when he debuted before were with 5 ERAs. So, um, I think he's over his skis a little bit. He has a really nice home park. He has some good matchups. When those are all lined up, I'm into him. In any given season, if I found him, I'm great with this. But if I'm in a keeper league, I would shop him. Honestly.
Yeah. I get the sense that most people in most leagues are skeptical, but what he's doing is at least working well enough where he's probably more than a home streamer, and that's where he started the season. It was in deeper leagues. Oh, if he's pitching in his home park, I'm using him. Now I think I'm going to choose a few more spots outside of Miami where I'll actually throw him out there against some of the league's weaker lineups, where in the past I may have been a little bit more careful. This week he's at Boston. I don't love that spot for him. That's one where I would actually try to avoid him. Home next week against St. Louis and Philly as part of a two-step. I think you'd have to use that 2 at home. If you can't use him for 2 at home, you can't use him. So I think he'd be in for that, but out for this road trip against the Red Sox.
Yeah, I think he's I think he's a lesson for us. Like, we picked up Colin Ray this week as a streamer in our main because he's got a bunch of pitches, he's got good matchups, he's got the same location plus, and the same sort of approach as Braxton Garrett. So anything can happen. I also was talking to Gabe Kapler about how the Giants hit Bobby Miller well. And he said, he's not to take anything away from Bobby Miller, but like our team sometimes has a harder time preparing for, the Michael Wakas of the world, guys who have 4 or 5 pitches and can mix them around and command them all. So you might be saying like, why isn't this in the model? Why can't we spot these guys better? Why can't we bet on these guys? Why don't you just bet on Braxton Garrett to keep it going? And the problem is just that, like, with command guys like this, I think a little thing goes in their mechanics or their health, and it just kind of all falls apart. And there's, just look at Tyler Anderson over in Anaheim as an example of a guy who's basically the same guy, right? Lots of pitches, good command, was great last year and is not this year. Another guy who's a little bit like this, although Merrill Kelly has more out pitches, his changeup and curve are like legitimate out pitches. But Merrill Kelly is and Miles Michaelis are this type too, and they kind of go up and down. Zach Eflin is this type. And Marco Gonzalez is this type.
Sort of, yes. Like that's where my mind keeps going. And the thing that I keep looking at
is this type. These guys go up and down. They're not good bets every year to every year.
I think the problem is all of those pitchers have pretty wide ranges of outcomes, but even within that group, there are still subtle enough differences that are like the difference between Erod and Marco Gonzalez is actually pretty big for me. Even though by results, sometimes when Marco Gonzalez is good, he's better than Erod when Erod's bad. And you step back, you're like, wait, why? If one of those guys is bad, it should be Marco Gonzalez.
But these subtle differences may not all speak well on Braxton Garrett, is what I'm saying. Because when I pointed out that Merrill Kelly has some out pitches, he has multiple pitches over 100 stuff plus. And you pointed out that Eduardo Rodríguez is better than Marco Gonzalez. Well, Eduardo Rodríguez's slider is above 100 stuff plus. Like, he has a legitimate out pitch. So, if you're watching Braxton Garrett, I mean, one of the questions is that slider a legitimate out pitch? Stuff Plus says no, it's just a boring pitch. You just said in your walk up to this that it seems like he's locating the slider better.
Yeah, it definitely looks like it. Look at the maps from 2022 to 2023. You see I know the StatCast whiff percentage calculation's kind of ridiculous, but it's his best whiff pitch right now, 45.3% by the way they measure it.
Because it's whiff over swings.
Yes, yeah,
right. So that always makes it look way bigger. Yeah,
and he's getting more with the changeup than he did last year. I don't know how viable that really is, but the cutter. That's the funny thing about that cutter. the cutter doesn't seem like it's an extraordinary pitch. It's worked to get him whiffs so far. So
Yeah.
yeah, this is pretty interesting. That Kapler comment, it kind of makes me think about building a pitching staff. We've talked about it with the Rays bullpen and other bullpens that have all these different angles and different looks, and the Giants certainly have that too. Maybe your rotation sometimes, like if you don't have 4 or 5 guys that all have Bobby Miller's arsenal, it's hard to get 5 of those guys and then keep them healthy. Maybe having a couple of guys that throw 4 or 5 different pitches and are funky and just keep you off balance. Maybe that's the next best thing. Maybe we underrate that because we like 98 plus and gross sliders, and we underrate players like Garrett as a result. The thing about Garrett that's pretty interesting in the profile too, the swinging strike rates, they're higher than I'd predict compared to a lot of the names that you mentioned as possible, similar pitchers. So even though it's not overpowering, he is getting a lot of swinging strikes, 13.3% this year and even 11.8% last year.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I do think it's all in the back of location, so I'm still a little wary of it. But you're right. It's a better profile, probably the best whiff rate out of any of the guys that I mentioned.
I think that question came from Billy Ripkin's burner, not literally. I think it's just one of the regular listeners of the show that was asking us about Braxton Garrett before we got started. One other note here real quick before we get to some of the second-year hitters. It looks like Michael Soroka might be getting another look from the Braves. 3 pretty good starts at AAA Gwinnett. I don't know if anything's actually changed in terms of the quality of his stuff. When we talked about him earlier this year, it wasn't really eye-popping on his first kind of rehab run in the minors, but AJ Smith-Shawver has been sent down. So apparently the Braves want to get another look at Soroka to see if he in fact has taken another step forward as he tries to get back and be a consistent, healthy member of that rotation again.
I don't see much difference in the Stuff Plus. It's down. He started the year better than anything he's done since. And I don't see much difference in Location Plus, so I don't know about that. I can maybe do some pitch mix stuff here real quick. But I mean, one thing that was true for me when I saw Smith-Shawver's debut, when I watched it, and when I looked through the model numbers and stuff, I thought the fastball was a little too close to average. And one of my big clues was watching him face the Rockies on the road. And it was a fine start for me. Let me see what the actual numbers were on that one. Do you remember? It was like 5 2/3, 6 strikeouts, 3 earned runs. You could look at that and be like, yeah, great start. Good job, rookie. Except it was Colorado on the road. And there were some not great hitters in that game that touched his fastball in a way that I was like kind of surprised. Like Tovar went 2 for 4. Coco got a hit off the thing. And then there were some high whiff guys like McMahon got 2 singles off of Shawver, I think. So like I thought that people were squaring up the fastball pretty well. And the model never liked his curveball. It's a really big curveball, and he didn't really throw it that much. So it became kind of dependent on his slider. And so I was never that big in on Smith-Shawver, and the model did not really like him. And long story short, Rockies on the road hit him, and that's not a good sign.
I wonder if when we see Smith-Shawver next, if he'll be elevating that 4-seamer more consistently than he did.
He was not elevating it.
He's surprisingly low in the zone.
I could not understand that either. I was like, this will do better if you elevate it, because he did have enough ride, but I couldn't tell if it was, missing or that was the plan.
Yeah. I don't know. I imagine they'll try and change that up once we see him back. But hopefully this time around, things can be better for Soroka. A little bit of a bummer that you're not seeing anything really different in that arsenal so far. But maybe it'll just be fine-tuning the command a little more and locating exactly where he wants to once he gets that call back up, probably at some point this week.
I have a June 16th start. Soroka threw 42 fastballs with a 75 Stuff Plus. 12 sinkers with a 99 stuff plus. So that's weird for me because hasn't his sinker always been better than his four seam?
Yeah, why would you throw so many four seams then?
I don't know. The slider looked good, 117 stuff plus, so that's good sign. That's actually something nice. Is the slider looked good, and he threw 6 changeups. So is that a demonstrably different mix than he was doing in the big leagues? Let me look real quick. I would assume maybe they told him to work on his four seam.
Maybe.
Yeah, he was equal four seam sinkers in the big leagues. Maybe it was just like some short term work on the four seam, and maybe he'll come back and pitch the same mix, but the four seam will be better. But he's a risk with by any metric. K minus BB is negative. Swing strike rate is 8% this year, and it wasn't that great the last time we saw him. Strikeout rate's bad, you know. So Soroka's a little bit of a wait and see for me.
Yeah, I think if you're interested in him, it's more for deep leagues. You're trying to get him cheap
or even
in
an
a 15.
NFC, a stash where you do like you put him on a stash chain where you're not gonna start him right away. You're just putting him on your bench.
Yeah. If you're lucky enough to have a spot for that, you could try to do that with Soroka. Let's get to some second-year hitters. I put the question out there on Twitter from the Rates and Barrels account, just asking people of the second-year hitters who are you most interested in, and I thought we'd get more names from the bottom part of the leaderboard. I thought we'd get more questions about Spencer Torkelson and CJ Abrams and Shea Langeliers and Nick Pratto, and I put them on the rundown anyway. But a lot of the questions were about the potential stars, the higher end players. I mean, Julio Rodríguez was a player people are still very interested in for good reason, right? If you take them in the first round and they don't do what you expect them to do, you want to know why. Is there something actually wrong? And I think we talked about Julio maybe a month or so ago. At that time, I didn't look at him and say, yes, he's definitely going to fall short of expectations. I think there's still a lot of things going right in this profile. He's still making a lot of hard contact. Barrel rate's down just a little bit from last year, but we're still looking at a power speed combo that's right on track with what he was expected to do, even though the slash line has taken a pretty good hit from where it was as a rookie.
Yeah, I tried to talk to him about this a little bit. Didn't get far. He's like, I'm always adjusting game to day to day. But I was trying to get to the fact that the book is pretty much fill him up on the outside part of the plate and outside low. And this year he's swinging a little bit more at those pitches. You can see it in the 37% chase rate last year, 41% this year. Neither of those numbers is very good, and but he wasn't concerned, and I could see his point because he's still above league average. He's still going to hit maybe 30-30 this season. He's going to be really close to doing 30-30 this season. He's still the star center fielder on a great contract, blah 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 blah. You never know when. And that's sort of what we were talking about. I was like, I was trying to ask him, like, when does it become a problem? Like, when is it I have to do something as opposed to let me just game plan for tonight? You know what I mean? When is it like, oh, this isn't working? And it's kind of hard to say if you're still above league average and still headed for 30-30, like, it's kind of hard to be like, oh, this isn't working. I really need to do something. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I don't know that we're going to see major changes, maybe just some hot stretches where maybe he hits some pitchers that aren't that great at filling up the outside corner, or he just runs into randomly a stretch of some lefties that he can hit well, gets going, gets into a good spot, starts spitting on that pitch away, and just sort of naturally with the ebb and flow of the season gets into a hot stretch. That's the narrative I'm telling myself, because there's not that much different from last year to this year, and he's still a very good player. I'm not comfortable saying that any of the shine has come off yet.
No, I think if you are participating in some mid-season drafts, I know NFBC is going to have some gladiators coming up during the All-Star break. Those are just $50, 15 teams, no benches. I know Underdog is running a big best ball contest for the second half. It's only $7 to get in that. So if you're getting the itch for more drafts, they're coming.
Still a first rounder.
Still probably this moves from the early part to the late part. I mean, you're talking about a top 15 player still, even with this half, if not still a top 10 guy. I think it's a little bit like Acuna not quite being Acuna coming off the ACL. We don't have the injury explanation, but you still see those flashes of all the things that you liked in Julio Rodríguez that would keep you interested in him, because you know there's a very good chance you're going to get that payoff over a half season. The second half could be monstrous, and it could be an easy 30-30 type season, and it could be one where that slash line at the end of the year ends up looking much like you thought it would going into the season.
Yeah, although I was agreeing with your head nodding. I'm now running year to date auction value.
So what he's earned so far.
And this is according to the auction calculator. And I'm not seeing it. Oh, there he is, 30th.
30th among hitters or 30th overall?
30th among hitters.
Okay.
I still think he's gonna jump in there.
Oh yeah,
there's some weird
season
stuff on here. Lane Thomas is 14th.
The rest of season projection from the Bad X is 280, 344, 508. That is almost identical to the slash line he gave us as a rookie last year. The fact that the K rate hasn't gone through the roof.
Rest of season projection is 11th among batters.
Right, and I would comfortably draft off of that.
Would you draft him? And would you take him over Soto, who's 10th?
Yeah, for the steals probably.
I think so, yeah.
Categorical
would you take him
balance.
Over Trout, who's 9th?
Yep.
Maybe. I'm not sure I'm taking him over Tucker, who's 8th.
Yeah, we talked about Kyle Tucker, I think, a week or two ago. I don't think anything's wrong with Kyle Tucker.
Yeah. Paul Goldschmidt is 7th, but would you draft Paul Goldschmidt 7th in the second half best ball league?
Nope.
No.
I don't think anybody would.
Even though the projection says that. It's amazing how you're just like, nope, I just wouldn't. I see it, but I wouldn't do that. And then now you're getting into Ohtani, Jose Ramirez, Vlad Guerrero, Freeman, Acuna, Tatis. I think he's behind those maybe. So maybe I'm slotting him in 7th behind Jose Ramirez, Shohei Ohtani, and Tucker, 7th or 8th.
Yeah, so not much has changed, even though it's still.
Yeah, what would be your best ball top 10 for the second half of the season? I think I go Acuna over Tatis.
I would too. Yep.
3rd, Ohtani. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ohtani. 4th, you're looking at Vlad, Jose Ramirez, Freddie Freeman. Or unless you bump the Tucker Rodríguez into that group.
Probably skipping that group and moving someone else up. Yeah.
So then you could do, there's Tucker Rodríguez, Bo Bichette is a possibility.
Oh, maybe Wander up in there.
Not by this projection. It's interesting. But I do have MI.
Well, here's a good segue to our next player, Bobby Witt Jr. Rest of season expectations for him. He would have been in there. 17th
by the auction calculator in the Bad X. Behind Bo Bichette, Mookie Betts, Randy Arozarena, ahead of Trey Turner by 10 cents.
Yeah, this is pretty fun because we're looking at Bobby Witt Jr. now in a year and a half in the big leagues with a 251, 293, 427 line. Normally, if I say that slash line, you're like, oh, okay, that's a flawed player.
I'm not putting that player in my first round.
But he's got 32 homers and 53 steals in 966 plate appearances. And this year, he's running even more than last year. He's on pace to maybe run at 50 steals.
He's returned more value so far than Julio Rodríguez, 26th according to the auction calculator.
And there's some improvements along the way. More hard contact overall, so more barrels, and a little less chase, even though he still chases more than you'd like. This is still a really good profile. It's just strange to see someone that
He's 23. This is still progress. This is, it's a little bit small progress, but it's still progress.
Do you think there's a path for Witt to, even if he doesn't draw more walks, just do better with balls in play and lift his average in OBP that way?
100%.
Because that's kind of what the projections are saying is likely to happen. 277, 324, 501 from the bat with basically the same strikeout and walk rates. I think that's actually believable.
Bo Bichette walks 4% of the time and strikes out 17% of the time this year. Tell me Bobby Witt Jr. can't do that.
The only thing for me, I've watched Bo more than I watch Witt. Bo Bichette has just a ridiculous hit tool. The stuff he hits is stuff that most guys just can't get to.
Witt's swing and strike rate is higher. Witt's strikeout rates have been higher. Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, it doesn't mean Witt can't be there.
You know, like a 4 to 5% walk rate, a 19 to 18% strikeout rate. That's totally doable for him. He's improved it a little bit. He's improved it a little bit. If he does that and ups the barrel rate to 12%, I mean, this is just little improvements, but he could do all that and push his OBP to 320, 330. You know, his batting average to 280. Now you got a 280, 320 guy who's, you know, 30, 50.
Yeah, a lot of 30, 50 guys out there. Nope, no, there really are not.
Yeah, sometimes we focus, I think, too much on flaws like this. I don't know. I still see a lot of improvement. I still see, I see ceiling beyond this even. I think I see another level. So, you know.
I think the funny thing about it, if you go back to the beginning of Trey Turner's career, Turner struck out a little less, but also didn't walk a ton his first couple seasons. And it was more speed over power back then.
Had the power every year, yeah.
Yeah, but if you just change the outcomes on the balls in play, and I realize that's a pretty big adjustment.
Look at those BABIPs Turner has run in his career.
Right. You would have probably seen something that was Bobby Witt Jr. without the power, and the general read of Trey Turner would have been a lot different. I realize I'm like rewriting history in
but the other way of saying it is Turner's OBPs were inflated by BABIP in a way that we haven't seen Bobby Witt take advantage of yet.
Right. But given what we know about Witt, it seems like he would be capable of that outcome. So nothing to be disappointed in, really. I think there's a ton to still like, and the long-term outlook is still very bright for him. How about Michael Harris? Last time we talked to him, talked about him. We'd love to talk to Michael Harris sometime, but he was not really the same player he was as a rookie. I think some of that was just kind of getting back up to speed coming off the IL. Looks like in June he was more like himself. 4 homers, 3 steals, hit 350. It was like 54% better than league average for the month. I mean, this seems like the guy you were expecting to get if you were taking him at the 2-3 turn back in March. Is there anything in this profile that even gives you a pause, or would you actually be excited to take him if there's a discount based on the slow start he was having after that IL stint?
I don't want to pick the nits right after we just talked about we picked the nits too much. I see, you know, a little bit of like an inflated BABIP his rookie year that kept him at a 300 average. He had a 361 batting average on balls in play. You know, that's pretty aggressive. Although he's had some of those in the minors, but in the minors they have poor defenders. So the other thing is he does hit the ball on the ground a little bit more than you'd like, but he manages to barrel the ball still. So not really. I don't really have any problems with this. And last time we looked at him, we looked and said, you know, the max EV is there, the barrel rate is there, like he's going to be fine.
Yeah, I don't think much has changed for Michael Harris. From last year to this year, I think you're likely to get what you got last year prorated over the rest of the season.
I don't know that I'm dream projecting him into 30-30s. There's something that strikes me more as sort of 25-25 as a peak. You know what I mean?
That's fine. That's totally
it's
fine.
The ground ball rate. It's the, you know.
I think the key difference for me in Harris's ground ball rate, sometimes you see a player reach the big leagues, ground ball rate jumps up, and you think, oh, okay, what's wrong? Well, nothing's wrong with that player. It's just adjusting to better pitching. Harris has always hit the ball on the ground a little more than you'd like.
Yeah.
Just about all of his minor league stops. So this is not totally out of the norm for him, but he's still so young. He's 22. A lot could change for him in the next couple of years. The guy that actually belongs in the conversation, you were asking earlier about your top 10 for the second half drafts, Corbin Carroll.
Oh, yeah.
He's in that conversation. Like,
he should be in that top 10.
He's probably in the top 5 for a lot of people right now in terms of what he brings to the table.
I'm surprised the projections haven't caught up with that.
Yeah. I nitpicked him too much back in the winter, and I regret that. He's eased the concerns that I had about the barrel rate. He's chasing a little less, making more hard contact all around. probably has a path to be a top 3 guy for 2024 if this continues. Is there any particular reason when you look at the profile that you think the projections would be a little slow to push him all the way up?
Looking at a 9% barrel rate, 114 max EV, last year 6% barrel rate, 108 max EV. I guess I'm surprised that he might hit 30 home runs this year. And I think that might be where the projections don't line up necessarily with, like, we see 16 homers on June 26th and do the mental math and say, this guy's going 30-30 this year, right? No projection has him going 30-30. And I guess it's the same nit that we picked before the season, so we shouldn't get too excited about picking that nit again. A 9% barrel rate is good, but it's not great. So you look at that 268 ISO and be like, 9% barrel rate, there's a little bit of like, what's going on here? But I do think that the feet is what's going on here. There are times when he can make a single into a double. You know, there are definitely times where he's making a double into a triple. And so I just think he's a super exciting player. He does not hit the ball on the ground as much as Michael Harris. So he's going to hit some homers that aren't barrels. You know what I mean? And he gets to play in Coors some. The strikeout rate is great. The walk rate is great. The swing strike rate is great. I mean, it's really hard to look across this and find a problem. And I'm guessing the projections just look at that barrel rate and say, I don't believe a 268 ISO, but I'm telling you, man, I think he's going to hit 30 homers.
If you were choosing rest of season, Corbin Carroll or Julio Rodríguez.
Oh, man, I really should have seen that coming, shouldn't I?
Yeah. Walked into that one.
I really did. The auction calculator has them really close. Corbin Carroll, 26th rest of season. Well, not that close. Julio Rodríguez, 11th rest of season. So the auction calculator says Julio Rodríguez. My heart says Corbin. Although
it's not a slight at Julio Rodríguez if you take Corbin Carroll.
Yeah.
It's not. Corbin Carroll, I mean, especially with the shoulder surgery that cost him time, plus the 2020 that cost everybody a minor league season, he just produced everywhere. Yeah. Everywhere. Just passed every test with flying colors, and he is striking out less. Within his first calendar year in the big leagues, he is striking out less against the best possible pitching than he ever struck out in the minors. That's wild to me.
That might be enough for me to take him because Julio Rodríguez's quality of contact is better. But Corbin Carroll makes a lot more.
And I think I want that combo.
Yeah.
This is, again, not a knock on Julio Rodríguez. It is high praise for Corbin Carroll, who I really, really wish I would have had everywhere because it was out there.
Every projection system, well, not every, but most projection systems have Julio Rodríguez going 30-30.
Yeah. And they're very, very narrowly missing that on Corbin Carroll. So don't fall for it. Get in there. Get him. Adley Rutschman. Is there another level coming from him? I mean, it's just been more of the same, and the same is great because he hit the ground running last year when the Orioles brought him up. Average is up a little bit, OBP's up a little bit. Actually, the K rate's improved from where it was. Not a ton of barrels, but also a reminder that the lower K rate guys can often run those lower barrel rates. So I think the bigger question with Adley Rutschman is, like, what does the peak look like? Is there another level coming in the second half of this year, or is it coming in 2024? Or is this just already a guy who's at his peak and he's just really good and we should just be excited about the player he is today because this is what he's going to do for the next several years?
25 years old. I mean, the research says peak is 26, but that's always a range. And, like, you know, he could have his peak here at 27, 28. You know, catchers debut later. And from what I've seen in the research, peak later. So let's say in the next 3 years, I think he can have a season where he hits 280 and like 28 homers.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, catchers peak later. I mean, switch hitters sometimes could take a little bit longer, too. You get two swings you're working on all the time.
My evidence for this is just that he's been so good for so long that, and then there's like, you know, there's natural variance. Like, you can't just look at his 7-8% barrel rate so far and be like, that's what he's going to do the rest of his life. You know what I mean? So there's going to be a season where an 8% barrel guy has, 12% barrels.
Mm-hmm.
Just randomly. And so that's sort of my argument. Not necessarily that I look at any part of his game right now and be like, oh, he could obviously be doing much better just based on this thing he's already doing. I don't see that. He's earning everything he's doing right now. He's not necessarily earning more than what he's doing right now. But what he's doing right now is great. And I think there could just be another level in another season where something clicks in the way he prepared in the offseason or he approaches at the plate or something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right. That high 20s home run peak season, it still seems possible because all the things you need in that foundation have been there, and they've been there consistently going back to the start of his career with the Orioles last season. Let's talk about Gunnar Henderson for a moment. The Orioles were patient with him through a slow start, and it has really been a thing that's paid off for them, right? He looks like the player we saw a season ago. K percentage is up from last year, but more barrels and generally the same underpinnings that were there with the impressive debut. The things that pushed Gunnar Henderson toward that top 60 to 80 range overall in ADP, those are all there. It looks like low to mid 20s home run power, double-digit steals, solid value where he went. If you were able to ride it out in deeper leagues, you kind of had to. I almost think Gunnar Henderson leads us back into our how do you project strikeout rates going forward, because what he did at Double-A is looking like an outlier, right? Kind of like we're talking about Corbin Carroll reaching this new level in the big leagues. Well, Gunnar Henderson hasn't done that yet. Maybe he will over time, but a lot of his strikeout rates in the minor leagues were a little higher than you'd like to see for a player that is going to be an early rounder for what looks like the next several seasons.
Yeah, you know what he did it by? It's not chasing less. The recovery did not come from chasing less. He's a good non-chaser, and he's stayed that way. That's in fact he's chased a tiny bit more as he's gotten better over the course of the season. What has happened is a spike in his rolling contact rates. So in game 94 of his career, which was a couple weeks ago, his rolling zone contact was 91%. A high watermark for his career. When he debuted in game 18, it was 90%, and in between, it got down to 73% zone contact rate at times. In the end of May, his rolling zone contact was 71%. We just talked about a whole thing about this with Jordan Westburg and whose comps are and what the average guy does. The average guy at 71% zone contact, I'm sure, has over a 30% strikeout rate. It's worse than the group I was talking about earlier. Worse than Suarez. You know what I mean? Like worse than Eugenio Suarez. And here we are. That's game 77. And here we are 20 games later, and he's almost 20 percentage points better by zone contact. So he's figured out something in the zone. They were doing something to him in the zone. He's figured out a way to deal with that, and he's gone through the roof. And I think some part of that just comes from he doesn't chase much. So he doesn't have the greatest hit tool in the world, but he has great plate discipline. And I think this adjustment he's made speaks very well to the fact that give him some time, he can make an adjustment. And I don't know that he'll ever have a 22% strikeout rate, but I bet you a peak season from Gunnar Henderson, who is 21, maybe he have one season where he has a 23, 24% strikeout rate, something like that. And in that season, he will hit 290 with 35 homers and 10 steals.
If these great Orioles seasons, these peaks all happen at the same time, that's going to be
oh man,
an even more fun year to be an Orioles fan. Yeah, it's just totally ridiculous. Josh Jung, everything is better in that profile right now. It helps that nothing was really right when he came back from injury last year. We didn't really know what the baseline was. It was just an exposure to big league pitching after a couple of years of major injuries for him. I think what we're starting to see now that we've got really a half season of healthy Josh Jung is there is a ton of power. Hard hit rate is close to 50%. He gets the ball up in the air. So he's going to be a great run producer. The 30 home run pace looks absolutely legit. it's harder for me to even come up with a reasonable, like, where do we go from here with the K rate? The projections say this is about who he is, and I'm not sure they can be. I don't think the projections can do a great job because of all the time that he missed in the minor leagues. I think this is one where you could actually see a little more improvement than you might expect for a guy that's run close to a 30% K rate through his first 400 plus plate appearances.
Yeah, I mean, he's the type of guy that if he did chase just a little bit less, his contact rates could go way better. Because first of all, you can look at the rolling graph and see that he spent way more time at 90% zone contact than Gunnar Henderson. And for the season, he's at 85.6, but he spent 2/3 of the season so far above 90%. He just had one little part where he just went down and cratered. And I think that's just a young player. We're like, oh my God, they're just doing this one thing I haven't seen before, and then 3 weeks later he'd rebound and figured something out. He does chase a little bit, but not like on the 40% level. Like it's fine. So I could see just a little bit less chasing and a little bit more living at 90%. And I can definitely see 24, 23% strikeout rates in this guy's future. I mean, his minor leagues is littered with it, So I think that was just a sort of being a little green and dealing with what they were throwing at him. But you can tell just given almost the same amount of sample as Gunnar Henderson, he's at 86% zone contact. Gunnar's at 80. There's a difference here.
Second half leagues, Josh Jung or Alex Bregman? Who do you like better? That one you didn't see coming.
I did not see that one coming, and
the reason I'm asking this question,
auction calculator says $4 difference between the two.
Favoring Bregman, I'm guessing.
Favoring Bregman, but obviously quality of contact is going to go in Jung's favor. Mm-hmm. But it's never been one of Bregman's things. Quantity of contact is going to go in Bregman's favor.
So this is good, though. This gets us back to the Corbin Carroll thing from a little earlier. There's still, between Bregman and Carroll, there's like the extra, like I'll take the Carroll profiles, like the better spot where you're making more contact, but you're not making so much undesirable contact along the way.
Yeah. So 267, 12 homers is sort of the consensus projection for Bregman, and 255, 13 homers is the consensus projection for her. It's like, oh, that's $4 difference rest of season. It is, because it all adds up, ding, 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 and it's like the batting average, and it's only one homer difference. And yes, I get it. But then you also have like just performance to date to look at, and it's 274 with 15 homers for Josh Jung and 248 and 11 homers for Bregman, who just really hasn't played to his projections. I'm comfortable with this idea because I've definitely had him in a couple keeper leagues where I'm just staring at him being like, yes, the projections say you're always going to be better in the future. And then are you? He did have a better second half last year, but he ended the season at 259.23. I feel like he's going to end the season very close to that. And so I'm going to take Josh Jung. Especially, I think, in a best ball, man. I feel like Josh Jung could just have like a destroyer level, week, some weeks.
Yeah, I'm there with you. The reason I asked was because there was that big gap in ADP back in the winter and spring where
we said Bregman there was no one there. Saloon, yeah,
and I think Josh Jung is that guy that sort of jumped into that group. There's maybe a few others too, but he's someone.
Gunnar was like, well, I must have in at least one league taken Gunnar, over not taking Bregman, taking Bregman so I wouldn't take Gunnar, but
right,
that's going to be pretty close too.
Saying it's something to the effect, and I'm sure I've done this before, where it's like, well, Bregman's the player I want Gunnar to become. Gunnar might run more, but why don't I just take the guy that's done it before? And sometimes that doesn't work because they stop doing it. They're not robots. As much as we would like them to be robots sometime, they're not. Spencer Torkelson, this is going to be the harder part of the show. We'll get through these guys. It looks like things are getting a little better for Torkelson overall. It's still from the full season view, a lot of similar things that we saw last year. Big difference, though, more hard contact. 47.9% hard hit rate. That's up. More barrels. That's definitely good. Results, 8 homers in 75 games compared to 8 in 110 games last year. So he is getting to the home run power more often. Slash line overall still pretty gross. Are you willing to buy into Torkelson hitting the ball harder, hitting it in the air more often? And the projections point to him being a pretty good player in the second half. There have been some 12-team leagues where he's popped up on the waiver wire, and you'd have to at least consider picking him up if you're looking for some help on the corner.
Yeah, I think he's a decent guy to try and acquire in keeper leagues. I like the fact that he's still only 23 and he's made substantial changes to his batted ball mix, his barrel rate, his max EV is up. And he's done this without striking out more. He's in fact whiffing less. So basically, every sort of leading indicator is either solid and stayed the same or got better. And so I'm going to take him in a lot of places. I think I lean a little bit more towards being interested in him in keeper leagues where I'm like, okay, next year he takes that next leap and he gets to a 12% barrel rate. And then he really, starts to have like a 180, 200 ISO. And then we can start talking about a guy who will, have a 330 on base percentage plus and maybe a 475, 500 slugging, that's somebody I'm a little bit more interested in. Even these projections that you say are good and they're decent, they're for like 230, 240 average, 11 homers, 320 OBP, 400 to 420-ish slugging. It's not that great for a first baseman, you know what I mean? So I'd be a little bit careful in how excited I was in redraft leagues. But he also just seems attainable. And so sometimes you're like, man, is he going to be any better than Jared Walsh, who just got sent down? And yeah, he is. So let me just see if I can go get him real quick.
So if you look at the rest of the season projection, you kind of make that a full season projection for the future and say, that's kind of where I think he's headed. Okay, fine. That's like 245, 22, 24 homers and good run production because he'll be in the heart of the order. He'll play every day. Who had that projection at first base coming into this season? Christian Walker was like that, 252, 24 homers. That's kind of the same player. CJ Cron. If that's the player Torkelson is, it's a disappointment relative to being a first overall pick and everything, but it's still a good outcome in the sense of that's a solid everyday sort of player that does make a fantasy impact and actually does make the Tigers better over time. The strange thing about Torkelson is that even in the minors, like a lot of guys like him, they hit for average in the minors. They hit for a pretty good average,
he was
a big
lick the ball
OBP.
Travel guy who didn't strike out that much.
Yeah, it's like to see a 238 and a 229 from him in his 2 stints at AAA. It's kind of weird. Even in AA, 263. It's not bad, but this guy went 1-1. He should have hit like 280, 290. I know that's splitting some hairs in some ways, but I think it's the type of contact he's made hasn't been quite what you'd expect it to be, but maybe just maybe turning the corner. How about CJ Abrams? You mentioned Luis Garcia earlier. I think if I'm looking at the middle infield in DC, I'm still a lot more interested in CJ Abrams than I am in Luis Garcia. Do you share my optimism?
Yeah, with who?
CJ Abrams?
No. You have optimism?
Some, yeah.
What? Why?
I like him more than Luis Garcia.
I don't.
I think there's still room for more power growth. We've seen the barrel rate improve a little bit this year. K rate is not horrible. I'd like to see him walk a little bit more, but there's a power speed combo. You're probably talking about a 15-15 guy right now with room for more growth. And I think because of Abrams having a ton of injuries during his time in the minor leagues, there's some lost development time that isn't necessarily accounted for. And I think that's part of the reason I still believe there's one more level he'll reach over time. When we were talking about him at the end of last season, I think I even traded him around this time last year in one of my keeper leagues. I thought we're going to have to wait a while to get the power. And we're not getting as much as people initially thought. But this is sort of the progression that we were
expecting. It's a little better
expecting.
than last time I looked. 112.5 max EV is, I think, probably 50 raw power.
Yeah, max EV is 83rd percentile.
Okay, so that's more like 55, 60? 60
Good sprint speed.
55? He got given a 45-55 raw power by Fangraphs. So But they also gave him a 70 future hit tool, and he has a 12% swinging strike rate, 23% strikeout rate. Like, I'm just not seeing it. And then he has a minus plate approach. I mean, just awful.
Do you
Like a
think
44% chase rate last year, 41 this year, like a combined 2.5% walk rate for his career. This is like all the worst parts of Luis Garcia without all the good parts.
Yeah, but we're talking about a guy who was drafted out of high school and got to play 114 professional
And is
games
22
before he
years
debuted.
old.
Yeah. Like the flaws in his game, like the plate skills still need to improve, like chasing outside the zone too much. To me, it's so much more excusable. And maybe I'm forcing the narrative to just like work in my favor in this case. But if all the things people who analyze prospects said and wrote about CJ Abrams 3-4 years ago, if we're going to believe that, and I think we should, he still has some significant room for growth. And he's just getting to do it at the big league level instead of doing it stuck at AAA, which would be more than appropriate.
A cautionary tale about how we get all up in arms and excited about the new prospect that, you know, is doing something in the minor leagues, and, you know, he becomes this buzzy name. And, you know, I think even AJ Preller trades on that, where he's just like, yeah, I'm not sure this guy's any good, and like I'm gonna trade him before anybody realizes I don't even think he's good. You know what I mean? Like, so I think the best thing he has going for him is his age, and I don't think that I would spend much more to spend, you know, the next 3 years trying to figure out if he's actually going to capitalize on that stuff. I don't really see it.
I am going to try and get CJ Abrams everywhere. That is my goal. Everybody's out. I'm in.
I guess, you know, he could be one of those players that's just better in fantasy than he is in real life, because he is going to end the season, according to projections, with 13 homers and 20 stolen bases.
Yeah, that's fine. That plays. I think he's going to keep getting better.
More than I thought.
How about Shea Langeliers? You see him a lot. Better days ahead for him. Chases outside the zone a bit, but by the numbers, probably deserves better results than he's had so far.
I love him for like almost the exact opposite reasons, which is I think he's a better real life player than fantasy. So I'm not sure that I'm advocating everyone go get him, but I think he's a heady catcher, starting catcher, guy who, like, he could potentially grow into some Murphy-esque type shoes, but because I see a lot of the same work ethic and how hard he works to have a good rapport with his pitchers and to call games well, and how he thinks about the game. I feel very positive about all that. In terms of what I'm looking at, in terms of on-field results and numbers for Shea Langeliers, he's kind of maybe one of these conventional swing and miss catchers who hits the ball hard.
Yeah, that offensive profile behind the plate is somewhat common, but I do think because of the lineup he's in and the possibility of them gradually getting better over the next couple of years, he might be a little underrated in the short term as someone that has that big batting average flaw. I do wonder when you get those guys that have the added work ethic, when you can spot that. You know, Marcus Semien, or somebody you talked about, had that years ago too. How much you can just keep betting on that profile to change. And I think with Langeliers, it's early enough in his career I'd be willing to do that.
It's hard to see it from the outside. I mean, you'll see it. Like, it is rare probably for someone who has poor work ethic to have an article written about how good his work ethic is, right? It is harder to spot the ones that don't have articles written about it, being like, does this guy or does he not? I don't know. And you like try to watch him. But I heard similar good things about Cal Raleigh coming up. In terms of, I went to Modesto and met Logan Gilbert and Penn Murphy and you know, a lot of those guys, and they talked about Cal Raleigh then, and so, you know, I think Cal Raleigh has similar sort of secondary characteristics, but his primary characteristics are better. His barrel rate's better. His max EV is better. His strikeout rate's better. You know, so if there's a would you rather, I guess I'm taking Cal Raleigh.
Yeah, I think there's still a little ways to go before Langeliers gets up to that level. But I think it gives you an idea where he could be going.
Like that. He could be like that. Yeah, he could do something like this.
Yeah, look at what Raleigh was doing when he entered the league, and look at what he's doing now with a little bit of time facing big league pitching. Last one for today. If you got others from this group that you want us to get to, we can get to those on Wednesday. Nick Pratto, maybe some good news in Kansas City. I think there's actually a few things that he does well. He's a career double-digit barreler. Doesn't really have a reaching problem either. And now he's got a much clearer path to playing time, unfortunately, because of Vinny Pasquantino's injury. But he was playing in the outfield even before Pasquantino got hurt. So those two guys could actually coexist in the lineup long term. So what are you seeing with Pratto? And
84% zone contact rate. Just to give you an idea of like maybe the Westburg thing is actually maybe we should be a little bit worried about his strikeout rate. 84% zone contact rate for Nick Pratto, who has a lifetime 36% strikeout rate. I don't think I understand that totally, because he's an 84% zone contact rate and then a 24% O swing. So like, is he just like really missing anytime he swings outside the zone? Let me see here. His is out of zone contact. Yeah, that's really bad. 40% is pretty bad. So he should be a guy who should try to whittle that chase rate down even more.
He's done a pretty good job of that so far.
In the zone, he's better. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that could happen with more playing time. But the minor league track record suggests this is your first base version of the catcher who swings, misses a lot, and makes powerful contact.
Yeah. Frustrating, because there are some pretty intriguing tools here in terms of that power, especially for Pratto. So
I think I like someone like Ryan Noda better, just because the chase rate is better, the barrel rate is similar-ish. We're talking about similar guys, but Noda walks more, plays all the time, does not have a guy coming next year that's going to take his job necessarily in terms of a big old prospect, unless you think Soderstrom's going to push him. And, there's still like a couple places you can put big, tall guys, that can't play defense. So I think I like Noda a little better than Pratto, but I like Pratto a little better than I did last year.
Yeah, I think he's one of those players that in deeper leagues is slightly overlooked that could actually be surprisingly useful in the second half, even though it comes with some batting average downside. I think that's very clear for anyone that has a 35% K rate.
Yeah. And I think what the best use for him in a lot of leagues is like a bat streamer, which is something we don't talk about enough, but yep. You get a schedule, a point in the schedule where like he goes and visits the White Sox and goes to the Red Sox, or something where he's like, oh wow, it's 2 series in a row. Maybe he gets 6 games this week or 7 games this week, away from home. Then I get a little bit more interested.
Yep, I think that's a really good way to look at Pratto if you're in a weekly format and just looking for someone to give you a little upgrade from time to time based on that schedule. We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, if you got questions for a future episode, you can email those to us at ratesandbarrels@gmail.com. You can also tweet at us. Eno's at Enoceris. I'm at Derek Van Riper. The pod is just at Rates and Barrels. If you'd like to send questions there, that's an easy way to get them in as well. Or you can drop us a question under this video on YouTube. If you made it to the end, thank you for listening and watching all the way through 78 minutes of goodness, or what I hope was goodness. I made the rundown too big.
Oh. It's your fault. I knew it.
I put news on top of our rundown. That was a whole show.
Gabbing, talking, whatever.
Yeah, it was mutual. It's shared flaw. Yeah. Shared flaw. But that's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.